Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Ted Eckers. I'm the president of the St. Louis Park Historical Society. I'm very honored to be here tonight to introduce our guests and also share a little bit about what the society has been up to. Our goal of the Historical Society is not only to preserve our stories and artifacts of our unique city, but to share them as well. We already do that through events like this, as well as on our website and seasonally at the depot. We envision a place people can learn about what makes this city special, the accomplishments of notable alumni like Tom and Susan, or the successful businesses like Nordic Wear, or maybe even about a childhood home or neighborhood. We see a hub for people to capture and share their stories, much like Tom has done in his latest book. The Historical Society does not have a permanent home, and we need one to achieve the goal I've outlined here. So rather than raising money for rent in spaces that are not easily accessible or temporary, we are committed to finding a permanent history center that will serve the community for decades to come. So tonight marks the beginning of a $1 million capital campaign. All the proceeds from your tickets tonight goes towards that fund. And I want to thank you on behalf of the Board of Trustees for getting us off to a great start. I also, of course, welcome you to make any additional donations in the lobby afterwards, and you'll hear more about our fundraising efforts throughout the year. So with that, let me formally introduce our guest this evening. Our interviewer tonight, Susan Linné, comes from St. Louis Park's long list of distinguished natives. Susan is a longtime journalist with significant experience as a foreign correspondent. In the 1960s and 70s, she was in Europe, Africa, and Argentina. She then served for decades with the Associated Press in both domestic and foreign bureaus, and as bureau chief in Madrid, West Africa, and East Africa. She grew up in St. Louis Park, living on Georgia and Toledo Avenues. She wrote for the high school's newspaper, The Echo, and was recognized as a distinguished alumna of Park High. She now lives in Minneapolis, where she writes book reviews for the Star Tribune. So please welcome to the stage, Susan Linné. We'll be speaking, of course, tonight with Tom Friedman. Tom has been the New York Times Foreign Affairs columnist since 1995, is a three-time Pulitzer Prize winner, received Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Overseas Press Club and the National Press Club, and is the author of 6 best-selling books, including his latest, Thank You for Being Late. But locally, he is known as a 1971 graduate of St. Louis Park High School. He grew up in a typical St. Louis Park home on 23rd Street in Kentucky, was, like Susan, a staff member of The Echo. He was also an editor of the school literary magazine, a member of the varsity golf team, and it is my understanding even a member of the homecoming court. Please join me in welcoming Tom Friedman to the stage.
Good evening, and thank you for being on time.
And thank you for putting your cell phones on silent or something.
Both Tom and I grew up in St. Louis Park, and we both left. And I returned only recently after about 40 years outside the United States. Tom has lived in the United States, I think, most of his life, but he probably travels out as much. For the past 40 years, he's been going and coming a lot, as you'll see in his book. When I was doing research for this interview, I came across a review in the British newspaper, the Times Literary Supplement, where it referred to St. Louis Park as a down-at-heel neighborhood. Nonetheless, managed to produce not only Friedman, but also the Coen brothers and the comedian and Senator Al Franken. Another review says that Friedman's 100-page meditation on what made Minneapolis suburb a great place to grow up helps to explain his, quote, unrelenting upbeat attitude, unquote. And then there's the online comment after the Richard Harris story that appeared recently in the Star Tribune about Tom and St. Louis Park. And it asks, What is the point of this story? The 4 Jewish residents went on to great things? It's not clear. So, Friedman, was there really something in the water that made this place special? And what were your first memories of this?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you here, sharing the stage with you. Thank you for doing this. And thanks to the St. Louis Park Historical Society for all the help they gave me. Jeannie Anderson in particular I was on the phone with her a lot for the St. Louis Park section. Not to mention your brother Paul. And thank you all for coming. It's great to do a neighborhood concert. What was in the water? Well, there's a general answer to that question, and then there's a particular answer to that question, because I've been asked that on the book before. The general answer is, which those of you who grew up here, contemporaneous with me, I now understand. We grew up in the 30 glorious years after World War II. We grew up in an amazing time in American history, between sort of the late 40s and the early 1970s, when America stood astride the world with overwhelming both military and economic dominance. And so one of my favorite quotes, which is from Congressman Norman, who spoke about growing up in Minnesota and in general, he said, if you were a white male in Minnesota in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s and 60s, you actually needed a plan to fail. Because you had to sit down and design a plan on how to fail. Because there was such an updraft of both what I would call high-wage, middle-skilled, blue-collar and white-collar work. So my dad did not go to college, but we led a middle-class lifestyle. And I only realized after I wrote the book that I only remembered that my dad's uncle, Jerry, was a loan officer. Somebody changed the mic, I don't know if that's exactly what it was. I was a loan officer at Farmers and Mechanics Bank, and he only had a high school degree. Could anyone be a loan officer at any bank today with only a high school degree? So it was a time when there was such, first of all, an updraft of work that was the foundation of the American middle class, high-wage, middle-skilled. And that accounted for, and there was a lot of wage compression. I don't remember anyone be phenomenally wealthy in my life, or as I went to high school, or phenomenally poor. And they may have been, but not in my orbit, and I went to public school all the time. So that was a source of, I think, optimism. And second was this accidental experiment in pluralism, where in a very short period of time, because of the emigration of the Jewish community from Minneapolis, primarily to one suburb, you had basically a social experiment of this Jewish community and a strongly Scandinavian, Northern European Protestant Catholic community, kind of put together in a way that if Sweden and Israel had a baby, and you got this mix of this sort of neurotic Jews shot out of a cannon North Minneapolis, and really this very pluralistic Northern European ethic, and they came together, and I think they produced a really interesting combination.
But according to, it seems the popular view is that the people who are remembered and recognized in this what's in the water business are 4 Jewish guys.
Yeah, but I think that's just a cliche of some reviewer. I think if you look at the people who came out of St. Louis Park, a broad spectrum.
But I think that those of us who grew up who were not Jewish were also very deeply affected, because for many of us, in my case, I went to Lenox and Fern Hill, and I think the only thing I knew about Jews was in my Sunday school books, and they lived in those flat houses with little things like that, and ate flat bread, and going after to the school. This many of us, it was our first experience
Right.
at meeting people who were different.
Right, and I think there was a real sense of discovery on both sides. And I think that was, part of the magic of the place. I think there was also the wider Minnesota community that was evolving, I think, under a very progressive set of leaders. Rondale, McCarthy, Humphrey, Fraser. These were a unique set of Friedman political leaders that I think also shaped the environment we grew up in. And lastly, and it was one of the things that, can they turn the bass down, whoever is controlling it, somebody?
Yes.
Controlling this microphone? It was really good.
Thank you, Tom. I'll do that.
Okay, thanks. It was good when I started.
I'll do it now. Should be.
The thing that interests me most about St. Louis Park, when I talk about it to, obviously, communities who don't know anything about it, is I try to explain to them, there's actually no moat around it. There's no wall. It's completely indistinguishable from the other suburbs around it, physically. And they do ask me what was in the water there. And one of the things I really discovered in writing the book, I'm a big believer that the way you get real change in history is when ordinary people do extraordinary things. If you're always waiting for extraordinary people to come along, well, occasionally you get a mentor. But often, what really builds sustainable change is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And just to finish this, because I spent a lot of time with both the current generation of St. Louis Park leaders, their predecessors, and some of their predecessors, town managers and whatnot. And I was struck something Jim Grimmeyer said. He had been both mayor and member of the city council and town manager. And he said, when I started, I started looking back in the early 70s. And he said that when he arrived to work, who was then the superintendent said, here's the deal, Jim, we never have a school bond issue when we're going to have a city bond issue. Yeah, and they're going to have to ask people, to pay a little more each time, and so we keep those separate. And I just remember him telling me, and when my predecessor came and I moved down, I sat down with the new school superintendent. I said, here's the deal. We never have a school bond. And these very seemingly innocuous and simple things, they accumulate over time. A good leadership, and they end up building something quite sustainable. And I think that was going on as well.
When do you think you became aware of the special nature of St. Louis Park? When you were growing up, did you have any idea? Was it something that was part of the tenor of the times, or was it something you found later on?
The first time I became aware of it, I remember quite distinctly, Susan, it was when I arrived in Beirut. And I spent 4.5 years between 1979 and 1984. So I arrived in Beirut I was there, my wife and I, from years 5 through 9 of the Lebanese Civil War. And when people asked me what I saw, I said, I saw a community breakdown. And so I was keenly aware that I grew up in a community with public schools and public institutions. And I'd come to a country where everyone sent their kids to their own religious school. And I saw actually a community breakdown. And the lens of my first book, From Beirut to Jerusalem, was actually I think I said this somewhere in the book, it was a Minnesota boy coming to Beirut and seeing exactly the opposite of what I grew up. And it had a big impact on me. And that was the first time I reflected on the fact that, well, I grew up in a community, I went to public schools, and it made my wife and I even more committed when we had kids than we did to send them to public school. And I believe the word public is a very sacred word in my vocabulary.
Do you think that, do you remember the leadership in St. Louis Park at the time when you were in high school? Did you have the impression that the city leadership at the time was anything out of the ordinary, or maybe?
No, I wasn't, I really wouldn't, I didn't have the depth perception or the experience. I wrote a book in 2008 called Hot, Flat, and Crowded, and my favorite chapter in the book is called If It Isn't Boring, It Isn't Green. And the theme of the chapter, this was a book about environment, and the theme of the chapter was addressed to young students who want to be environmentalists, you know. And I basically said everyone wants to be an environmental. Everyone wants to be on board. I'd like to be on board. Win a Nobel Prize, win an Oscar, Emmys, you know, it's so cool. But the real green hero, and I profiled in this chapter, was I think from NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. I built a chapter around him. He actually figured out a way to have the amount of energy consumption of every Coke machine in the country. Now to actually, by the way, when you have the energy consumption of every pop dispenser in America, you have a huge impact on the world. To do that though, first he had to understand how a pop machine worked, and second he had to understand how a utility worked. Now, there is no more boring institution on God's green earth than an electricity utility. And the only second most boring thing is how a soda pop machine works. And when he put those two things together, he actually had impact on your life and mine. That was phenomenal in terms of the energy saved. But to do that, you had to go through this really sort of boring stuff. So that's always been a view of life that I have.
When did you become interested in the minutiae of all these things? This seems to be a theme running through your various books, is you like how things work. Is this something that you can trace back to your school days in St. Louis Park?
It's a really interesting question. I've never been asked that before. By the way, you're 5 for 5, so it's so one of the things that I say to people that is, you know, it's really dangerous to disagree with me. And to say, well, that's pretty arrogant. See, no, actually, you don't understand. It's because I don't know anything. All I know is what I reported. So if we're going to have an argument, I hope you did your reporting too, because I can assure you that I did. And so we're all good at different things. And ever since I was at room 313 in St. Louis Park, I eventually realized the thing that God put me here is I really like being a reporter. I'm really curious about things, I'm really curious about people. And so I really like to I really do like to know how things work. And if you know, people who hang around with me know that when I'm in reporting mode, I'm incredibly relentless. And that's the word that's been used to describe me a lot. Until I feel I got to the bottom of this thing, I don't stop. And that applied to the Arab-Israeli conflict when I was doing that, and it applied to Moore's Law when I did this. So I have a friend, Sabes, who's in the book about a great teacher of mine. He's kind of a business philosopher. And we were at the Davos World Economic Forum 3 years ago, and there's a stairway there in the main hall, and we were talking for about 45 minutes. And at the end of the 45th minute, I reached for my laptop and pulled it out. And he said, "You son of a bitch, I've been talking to you for 45 minutes, and only now you think I said something worth writing down." Because he knew, because he's hung around with me, that when the laptop comes out, journalism is going to happen. And so I carry my laptop everywhere, and I interview people everywhere. And of course, the rap on me is Friedman, he just talks to cab drivers. Actually, I've never quoted a cab driver in my life. Because, hey, I was like, wow, by the way, why would I can talk to anybody? You know what I mean? And there's so many interesting people to talk to. And so, you know, whenever young journalists come and say, I want to do what you do, what do I need to know? You know? And I say, well, it's really good to know how to type fast. I went to London Secretarial School to learn how to type and take shorthand, which I quickly forgot. And you need to know some English and some history, some politics, and get to know some science, economics. But I think there's two things you need, I think, to be a good journalist. One is you have to like people. So I really like people, just how I wired. And, because if you like people, they'll kind of like you back. And that just means they'll be nice to you. It means that they usually open themselves to you in a way, that otherwise happens. And I am struck over the years how many journalists hate people. In my experience. But the second and much more important thing is that you have to be a good listener. And for two reasons. One is because what you learn when you listen. But the second reason is much more important, and I bet you experience this in Africa in particular, because I certainly did in the covering the Arab world. Listening is a sign of respect. And when people think you respect them, it's amazing what you can ask them and what you can say to them. And if people think you don't respect them, you cannot tell them it's dark outside.
So is this why you became a journalist instead of a professional golfer?
Well, that decision was made for me for other reasons. But never good enough. But to do anything in golf other than be captain of the ParkTv15 golf team. I did make it to regionals finally. But I really, I love, every day is different for me. I've never had a day where I didn't want to wake up and get dressed and go. I've never had a bad day in this business. And every day is different. I meet different people all the time. And again, people are around me, so many things I learn from, I do book events and I stop people along. If you come up to me on the train, the first thing I say, what do you do? I can't tell you how many people I've met, followed up with, learned from because of that. It's how I'm wired, but I am wired in another way. People are experts in docs, and Lord knows I learn from them. But whatever way my brain works, it works really horizontally. So when I'm like in Syria, I'm not just saying, Bashar Assad, leader, people, what's leader doing to people, and what are people doing to leader? I'm actually looking at the environmental dimension. Geez, they just had the worst drought in their modern history between 2006 and 2011. A million Syrian farmers left their homes and overwhelmed the cities. Assad did nothing for them. Then they got on their cell phones and they watched the Arab Spring happen. Then they got on WhatsApp and connected with one another. So if you want to understand a story like Syria, if you're not arbitraging all these dimensions at once, the climate, the globalization, the technology, the economics, the politics, you're never going to see the story. And so I'm always doing that. My mind's going back and forth. And I don't know where that comes from. But for me, that's the fun of it. That's the fun of it.
Have you been to a high school reunion?
Oh, I've never missed one.
So when you go, basically, do people remember you as the person they knew in high school or as the brand that you've become?
Hard to know. I was hardly a stellar student. I believe if I look back at myself, there's not a direct line, between here and there. I don't know when things kicked in for me. I had something to do with my dad died when I was 19, and in terms of my own focus as a person. My dad died at 56, so it really amazingly numb now when you think about it. But my best friends are still my friends here, and so I come home a lot. And they're my best friends because they're my best friends. And so it's not like this celebrity thing. I can only relax with them. It's all BS. They're just my best friends.
Can you tell me some of the names of your best friends?
Oh, God. Some are here. My friend Brad Lerman is here. We bowled together with our dads when we were 10 years old. I haven't been bowling alone since. And my best friends Ken and Jill Greer are here. Jake Goldberg and his wife Eileen, the whole Soskin family. These are people, my friend Mark Reed, who I grew up with on Sea Lake Road. We actually all had breakfast together this morning.
But not Bobby Z.
I didn't know him. He was younger than me. Yeah, he was Mark Tressman's friend.
No, I was hoping that he would come.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the part of the something in the water and the St. Jewish Park.
Yeah.
And how much, I don't know, I was debating when I was working up my questions, whether how I would phrase this, because it became,
Go ahead.
when I graduated in 1960, and that was the year that there was a big influx of people who came from North.
Right.
And we learned these great dances because the people from North had learned them from the people at Patrick Henry at the Pat Fuller dances. And it was just a matter of course, and when you meet people from other suburbs, they would say, oh, you're from St. George Park.
Yes.
And I could never figure out whether this was envious,
Yes.
is this what they're trying to be insulting?
Yes.
Or what it actually meant. What did it mean to you?
Probably meant more insulting than envious, but also it was part of we were different. You know, this place was different. By the way, and if I interview kids at the high school now, and it's in the book, in the second chapter, there's 2 chapters on St. Louis Park, then and now. And they tell that story. One girl who talked about babysitting, you know, for a family in a different suburb, and they said, where are you from? And she said, St. Louis Park. And said, pretty dodgy over there, isn't it? And so I think the sense that whatever is going on in the water here is still going on in some ways, to some degree. And it would take a sociologist of some much more training than me to figure it out. There was never the illusion that there was not prejudice or anti-Semitism or you know, any of these things that could fracture a community. You know, I kind of have a view of life. Perfect's not a man, you know what I mean? And so it's all about. I have my sort of whole theory of history is, I call it the tilt theory of history. That if you as a leader, all you do is take something that's tilted this way, and in your time in office, you tilt it that way. Take something that has a negative slope and give it a positive slope. You've done a really big thing. And as I think about the leadership of this state and this community when I was growing up, I would give them a lot of credit for it. And you see the fact that in St. Louis Park today, you know, about 15% of the households have kids in the public schools, but the bond issue's passed 75-25. So that tells me that something got tilted there, you know.
It also seems that I was far away at the time, but there's been a certain amount of trouble in a lot of high schools in the past 10 years was kind of a different mixture of students, but I don't recall that this happened in St. Louis Park.
No, they have amazing, I interviewed our superintendent here, I think he's a phenomenal person. I interviewed the high school principal and deputy principals and at the junior high, and they're as good educators as I've met anywhere in the world, in my view. And they have a real vision of how to manage diversity. And I think it's quite unique. And Washington Post rated St. Louis Park as the 5th best high school in the state of Minnesota, with a totally different demographic than we had. I remember something that Rob Metzko, the superintendent, which is every year the seniors always leave a message when they graduate for the next class. And he said invariably every year they say, take advantage of the diversity more than I did. You know, that this was a really unique experience. You should take advantage of it.
There's something that Chris, you wrote in your book that because your mom was in the Navy, she got the benefit of the GI Bill, which was a lot of the people who moved from North Minneapolis were able to do that in order to buy houses. If they had been African Americans, and even if they had been in the military, they would not have been able to do that.
No, I mean, there's no question that in that period of history, the Jews were able to escape the ghetto, but that African Americans en masse could not. And that was just the time.
Do you ever go back to North Minneapolis?
I actually did a fundraiser for the Northside Achievement Zone. And last night I actually did a dinner. I'm quite interested in it. And Sandra Samuels, who runs the Northside Achievement Zone, is a remarkable person. And I actually spent with her. Her husband's on the Washington Minneapolis School Board. And we actually met for a couple hours yesterday. I'm very interested in what's going on there. My wife was chair at the Seed School Foundation in Washington, D.C. for almost a decade in it's a charter boarding school, charter college prep boarding school, inner city, so with campuses in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Miami. And it's 99% African-American, free reduced lunch. And so it's one of the schools in William for Superman. And if you saw that movie, the documentary about education. And so I'm very interested in all of these issues firsthand. I've learned a ton about them in my life.
It seems that we are now, I think it's the 101st day of the administration of somebody that you happen to know. And I don't know whether you would have any observations about these 100 days. I think you mentioned to me before that you haven't had any contact with anyone in the administration, but I'm sure you still have some thoughts about it.
Gotta go now. So, I do know Trump a little bit from the world of golf. Actually, never played with him, but it's a long story. But I know him. And the last time I talked to him actually was about 2 years, within a year and a half ago now. It was the day we signed, President Obama negotiated the Iran deal, and the deal was consummated. And he invited me to the Oval Office that morning, before it was even announced, to do an interview about the deal. And 2 weeks earlier, I had broken my shoulder. I tripped and had to have it was a traumatic injury. I had an artificial shoulder. And I was in spectacular pain. And but I wasn't going to miss this interview. So I got my daughter Natalie to come and carry my stuff. And my colleagues actually tied my tongue, so I couldn't lift my shoulder. Okay, we were actually doing this interview on video, so it's going to run both in words and video. And we did the video, we did it, and I came back to the office. You know, one wonderful thing about Obama is he speaks in sentences and paragraphs. This is very important. So we had a transcript. I was getting the transcript, and I was in such pain, I was sort of typing like this, but I could cut and paste his paragraph. I could say, asked about this, and then I could just cut and paste the entire paragraph, so I didn't have to move anything around and save my limited ability to think. So the next morning, the interview came out, and I got called out. The morning shows, would you be on? And I told all of them, I am in such pain. Call me a couple of weeks. And so in between, Trump came out. And so when I finally showed up on Morning Joe a couple weeks later, they didn't want to talk about Iran anymore, they want to talk about Trump. So they asked me, what do you think about the wall? Because that was his, the whole thing. I said, on immigration, I take this very seriously. I think we should have a very high wall with a very big gate. So I signed for a high wall with a big gate. And so I went home and popped some more opiates. To be honest, all I remember was they did this interview. My daughter was there, and the president was very nice, and we were done. He took her back to the Oval Office in front of his desk, took a picture with her. It was a great thrill for her. And we walked into the Oval Office, back this little hall there, between there and the reception room. And I was sort of cornered there with him. He said, you better support this deal. So, and there were like 3 of them, and they were all pointing at me. And it was just like, so I get home and my secretary calls and says, Donald's looking for you. And so I said, well, tell him I'm home. I'm going to tell him to call me. So he calls and he said, this high talk. He says, Tom, high wall, big gate. I love that. I'm going to steal it. I said, Donald, you can steal it if you give me credit 1 or 4 times. And I said, high wall, big gate, I love that. And then he said, John Kerry is a moron, isn't he? And I said, you're not going to talk about Kerry. But I said, Mrs. Friedman has a message. So I told my wife I was going to call that. And he said, what's that? I said, Mrs. Friedman says, you have the country's attention. Use it for good purposes. Oh, Tom, good purposes. So that night he went on the debater the next night and said, "I'm for a high wall with a beautiful door." And that's like what I had in mind. And I've not spoken to him since. Actually, when he came to the New York Times, we did this amazing interview with him right after his Olympic, which I was there, seated across from him, asked the environment question. But I had no contact with this administration. And I'll tell you what I basically think. I think that what's interesting to me about the first 100 days, Susan, is that this is an administration that actually can only be judged by its second 100 days. Because what its first 100 days have been largely about is the president's allies and adversaries all talking him out of 90% of the hair-brained things he ran. So you just go right down the list. I'll rip up the Iran deal, Master Tillerson, not a good idea. I'll pull out of Paris, not a good idea. I'll pull out of NAFTA, that you heard from all the farmers in Minnesota. I'm going to, China, declare them a currency manipulator. Can't do that. Anything like North Korea. So if you actually, I'm going to cut taxes. The bond market's not going to go for that. And I think if you go on the list of 90% of things he's promised to do, either our adversaries or his own allies, the people he appointed, have checked him. And so I think that this is an administration that can only be judged by its second 100 days. Because now he's sort of come back to 0 point. Now we'll actually see what deals he's ready to strike. Now that we've in effect, pulled him back from all of this craziness. My view is that the real opposition party in America today is the state of California. Watch California, because California has real artillery, unlike the Democratic Party. So the Democratic Party doesn't have the House, doesn't have the Senate, doesn't have the Supreme Court, doesn't have the White House. They're really pretty powerless. But California is the 6th largest economy in the world. So just by way of example, California has its own automobile standards. And 11 other states have joined with them. So Trump can go to Detroit and say, guys, just pollute as much as you want. And then California says, not if you want to sell a car in California. Trump can say, coal, we're going to bring back coal. But California has its own environmental emissions performance standards that say that by 2025, I believe, 13 years from now, 2030, excuse me, 65% of energy in California has to be produced by renewables. So do you want to sell equipment in California? So California has gone to a nonpartisan board of retired judges to draw up its political districts to get rid of gerrymandering. You go right down the list. California has real power, and they just hired Eric Holder. He was the last attorney general to be their lawyer, basically against Washington, D.C. So watch for I think they have much more. California is the opposition party.
Just before we take questions, one of the major parts of the last part of your book is always looking for Minnesota. And Minnesota seemed to be a relatively safe and very blue state. And the past election has shown that to be, well, parts of it are. I think we are in one of the blue parts right now, but other parts have faded a bit or turned another color for a variety of reasons. And I wonder if you just could say a few words about, is that Minnesota that you were and probably are still searching for still the reality?
It's a very good question. And well, the short answer is no, it's not what it was when I grew up. But there are actually some things that are more interesting and better, and some things that are more challenging. So it's a very interesting experience for me because I spent, a little backstory about this book has its sort of, overt text, and there's a subtext. So the subtext is that this is my 7th book, and in the front of it, I do say this may be my last, I don't know. And so I dedicate the book to all the people who have helped me as a journalist throughout my career, going back to Beirut to Jerusalem. And the subtext was that I spent 30 years covering, as a columnist or reporter, the Middle East. And during those 30 years, I pushed a lot of rocks up the hill. I pushed Camp David, I pushed Oslo. I pushed the Arab Spring. I pushed democracy in Iraq. I pushed all these rocks up the hill. And I kind of woke up one day after the Arab Spring exploded and said, they all rolled back down. If this were baseball, I was batting 0-0-0 for the things I wanted. So I came home, and in 2011, I wrote a book with my friend Michael Mandelbaum called That Used to Be Us, about America. And actually, Hot, Flat, and Crowded was the same thing. I came, and it was all about nation building at home. Tried that there, didn't work. I'm going to bring my idealism home. And I think I coined the phrase nation building in America. That's what both those books were about. One was using energy policy to do it, the other was more broadly. And then I woke up one day and discovered the Middle East had chased me home. We didn't call them Sunnis and Shiites. We called them Democrats and Republicans. But we had become as tribalized politically as the people I ran away from. I would literally hear people say, well, I never let my kids marry one of them. And them they were talking about, not that that's praiseworthy, it was someone, not someone of a different race or religion, someone of a different political party. And I thought, and by the way, one of the characteristics of tribal politics, I'm sure you encounter this a lot in Africa, is they just oscillate from, I'm strong, why should I compromise? I'm weak, how can I compromise? And they never settle in the middle. So basically, I said, you know what? Forget you all. I'm going to go back home. I'm going to go back to the source of my optimism. And first of all, I want to discover, did I make it all up? I mean, did I just remember it all that God's involved? And if I didn't, are there lessons there that I can share instead? And so a lot of the subtext, that's the subtext of the book. And then that fit into a lot of the larger themes, which we can talk about later, which is that, so government moves at the speed of trust. And when what's basically happened now at our national level, federal level for government, there's no trust in Washington, D.C. And so that's why they can't get anything done. So people trust their state government much more than their federal government, and they trust their local government much more than their state government. So again, part of the subtext of the book, I believe, if I were running for office, I'd be running on a platform of progressive localism. The idea of pushing politics, decision-making, as much as we can. We need a federal government, we need an army, we need social security, we need a currency, I get that. But pushing as much decision-making down to the state and local levels, where there are higher levels of trust. My teacher and friend, Doug Simon, says in the book, trust is the only legal performance-enhancing drug. So I have two favorite stories in the book, I'll tell you. One is yours, and I'll let people read it, because it's just one of the most remarkable stories in the book, and one that people stop and comment on. And the other is when St. Louis Park tried to install solar-powered public Wi-Fi. And I interviewed the mayor, the town manager, and the CTO for the place, and for the book, and they told me the story. And I don't have to tell you the story, so you all know the story. So Clint is telling me about the day they announced that they had to take the system down because the ice froze on all the solar panels and white elephant, And $1.8 million that they had to sue this company in Naples. And after they have the press conference, he goes to lunch at the Harvest Moon Cafe. And the first guy who comes up to him, he describes the scene in the book, says, "You're the Wi-Fi guy, aren't you?" And he says, "Yes, I am." And the guy said, "Too bad that didn't work. What are we going to try next?" Now that is the sound of trust. So compare that to Solyndra in Washington, D.C. When that happens in Washington, D.C., the question is, whose career can I destroy? Who can I put into jail? How can I use this to smear the other party? And how can I take this as a wrench and put it in a wheelhouse?
I think I'll thank you right now for both being here, being on time and everything. and I think there are people who would like to ask you some questions. But unfortunately, I can't see them.
Oh.
My other lights-
All your chart.
Maybe the lights are coming up. So this gentleman right here,
Look back, excuse me.
there's a microphone.
There's a mic over there. Come up to the mic. I'll repeat the question.
You look back 30 years to St. Louis, when you grew up in St. Louis Park, you've seen it change between then and now.
Yeah.
What do you see going forward happening here? What do you see, what's the next?
Chris, what I saw the change then, I grew up here, I see the change now, what happens going forward? It's hard to, it's a good question, but I'm not steeped enough in the present here, other than what I did for my book, to be able to extrapolate forward.
Okay.
It's hard for me to, who would want to answer yes, because I'm not informed enough.
Okay, we've set this time aside for questions from members of the audience who want tickets at the platinum level first. So if you're a platinum ticket holder and you have a question, you can line up with either of the two microphones and fire away.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, that's
Over here, Jim, all right. Let's go back to St. Louis Park if we can.
Please.
Great school, and my Jewish buddies and the people I know, I thought it was every Tuesday and Thursday, got on a bus after we got out of Fern Hill or Park Hill, and went to Talmud Torah School.
Actually, 4 days a week.
4 days a week. We talk about that.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, after those kids that were being besieged by Talmud Torah got to high school, we had some very brilliant students. We had all kinds of brilliant students, certainly a lot of British Jewish students.
Yeah.
And I thought, I wonder, even though they were learning Hebrew, if that enforced, and I'm sure it was kind of enforced, extra study contributed to the scholarship.
Yeah.
What do you think about, do you have an opinion about that?
It's an interesting question. I one of the many people from the St. Louis Park Historical Society who helped me in my book. Hard to know. All I remember is that we got a snack. It was a chocolate chip cookie and chocolate milk. Can you think of anything less healthy? Maybe it was that. We had all this sugar. But I don't know. That again, that gets into an area that just I'm not equipped to answer. I haven't studied this. It's a dear question. Thank you. Anybody else? You don't have to be quiet. Please.
Hi, my name is Jake, and I was really impressed with the theory that you brought up about in the world is flat and the political climate changing with the, you call it the wall and the web party.
Right, yes.
Green sorting out, I believe. I'm from a really big family, and there's, all different types.
Right.
There's a couple siblings went to the academy, a couple went to Berkeley.
Right.
So being a contrarian in the middle sometimes, in a big political
Yes.
climate, I love to bring up that theory that you use, that, traditional liberals and traditional conservatives are kind of changing in this new climate.
Right.
How often have you brought that up, and do you see like a book of just that topic
Interesting.
in the future?
It's a good question. Let me try to answer it in 2 ways. Susan asked me something that I really didn't draw in mind to mention, but I didn't. So I'm writing this book over the last 3 years. Half the book is really hardcore technology, hardcore climate science, and hardcore sort of globalization stuff. And the question was, how do these come together? It took a while for me to, and I wasn't trying to force it. In my gut, I knew it was there, but it took me a while to understand. And so, but meanwhile, I'm watching Brexit, Trump is not in the book, Brexit. I mean, I allude to it, but the whole book's really about the plumbing, what's going on in the room. And so none of this is surprising, because the book's about the age of acceleration, and all this stuff is accelerating. And I'm now working on the paperback version. I just came from a week in Silicon Valley. And I'm re-interviewing some people who I interviewed for the book, because one of the hardest challenges I faced because I was writing about accelerating technology, was I felt like I had a butterfly net, and I was chasing a butterfly, and every time I got close, it moved. So I had to interview Brian Krzanich, the head of Intel, 4 times in the 3 years I wrote this book, because things were changing that fast. And I just came from GE in San Ramon, California, Bill Rue, really smart guy, who now explained to me what's going on, that I have to update now in my book, like really big stuff, that the cloud is moving out of the cloud and is being now distributed, They're now calling it the fog, and in fact, Brian Krzanich had a dinner for me, and the head of Intel with his Moore's Law team, the guy driving Moore's Law, the engineers. And I brought my daughter with me, the teacher that runs the school actually in California, and he sat down at the dinner and said, my ear's really tuned to when people say like really unusual things. That's usually a book chapter for me. And he sat down at the dinner and said, I believe my grandchildren will never grow. They will never grow up. And that's when the Notebook came out. And I said, let's talk about that, And so, that's the point is that I realize we're in the middle of these 3 accelerations in technology, globalization, and climate. And as a result, once I finished that, then I stood back and said, well, what do you want? What actually is happening? I eventually realized that we're in the middle of 3 climate changes at once. We're in the middle of the change of the climate. We're in the middle of the change of the climate in globalization. And we're in the middle of the change of the climate of technology. That fundamental things are changing. And then I sat back and said, well, if that's what's happening, what do you want when the climate changes? You want 2 things. One is you want resilience. You want resilience to be able to take a blow, because you get really disruptive things happening when the climate changes. And second, you want propulsion. You don't just be curled up in a ball, hiding in your bed. Okay. So then I thought, and this took a while, this wasn't like in one day, but who do I interview about how you produce resilience and propulsion when the climate changes? And then I realized I knew a woman who was 3.8 billion years old, and her name was Mother Nature, and she had dealt with more climate changes than anyone. So in the book, I make up that I go to interview Mother Nature, and I sit down with her and I say, Mother Nature, you've dealt with more climate changes than anybody. What are your strategies for producing resilience and propulsion when the climate changes? And this came from a larger view that I think that what's happened, we made the world so complex and interdependent that there's only one other thing as complex and interdependent as the world we've now built with our networks, our computers, and our hands, and that was the natural world. And that therefore we could learn huge lessons for our own politics by studying the biology. So my teacher and friend, Ingrid Lovelace, who's a great physicist and biologist, was really my tutor for a lot of this. And so I then made up Mother Nature's killer apps. So I said, well, first of all, she says to me, I'm incredibly adaptive. In my world, Tom, you have to understand, only the adaptive survive. But I do it, well, the first thing she said to me was, I have to tell you, everything I do unconsciously. Okay. She said, first of all, I'm incredibly adaptive, but in a brutal way through natural selection. Second, she said, I'm incredibly pluralistic. Oh my God. I love diversity. I'm the most diverse person you've ever met. My most sustainable and resilient ecosystems are my most diverse ecosystems. Applies to this community, by the way. And she said, I love pluralism. I try 20 different species, see how they all interact with humans. Third, she said, I'm incredibly entrepreneurial. Whenever I see an opening, a blank space, I fill it with a plant or animal perfectly adapted to that niche. Fourth, she said, I'm incredibly sustainable. In a circular way. Everything is food. Eat food, poop seed, eat food, poop seed. I'm incredibly sustainable. Nothing's wasted. Fifth, she said, I'm incredibly hybrid and heterodox. So I mix all kinds of things. I mix different bees with different flowers, different trees with different soil. Incredibly hybrid in my thinking. And lastly, she said, I do believe in the laws of bankruptcy. I kill all my failures. I return them to the great manufacturer in the sky, and I take their energy to nourish my successes. So I made up all of this, all right? When I got done, so now the election started. This is the sort of backstory that's going on in my head while I'm writing this. And I started to think, well, what if Mother Nature were running in this election? What would her party look like? Because my argument was that it's the communities, countries, and companies that most closely mirror those killer apps that will have the most resilience and propulsion in the climate changes. So I created Mother Nature's Political Party with an 18-point platform in the book. Of course, it's just a proxy for my own politics. And I explained that, I won't go through all 18, but the core idea is on some issues, I'm actually to the left of Bernie Sanders. I believe we should have single-payer health care. I don't understand how Sweden and Singapore can do that. But at the same time, I'm to the right of the Wall Street Journal editorial page. Because I actually would abolish all corporate taxes and replace them with a carbon tax, a tax on sugar, a tax on bullets, and a small financial transaction tax. So I want to get radically entrepreneurial over here to pay for what I think we're going to need stronger safety nets and trampolines over here, because this world will be too damn fast for more people. Now in our politics, our current politics, if you're for better safety nets and trampolines, you're almost never for radical entrepreneurship. And if you're for radical entrepreneurship, you're never for stronger safety nets and trampolines. What would Mother Nature call that? Stupid. Because she said, no, that's just stupid. These two things go together. But in our politics now, they can't go together. And as a result, we can't produce resilience and propulsion. And that's why I believe all our parties are blowing up now. The Republican Party, the truth is, it's already blown up. It was a fallow garden, and Donald Trump was an invasive species. Because the Democratic Party is blowing into it. And if they've been in office now, you'd have seen the blow. Because anyone, and all you have to do is watch the British election to see the fragmentation, you know. And so either these parties, as we know them, Tories, Labour, Democrats and Republicans, and all their European versions, and you can see France, either they will make this shift, I believe, to Mother Nature's platform, or they can blow it. I don't think you can go anywhere else. And so that's the backstory.
Thank you very much.
John, I have a question on your writing. I want to take you back to something we discussed earlier. Tell us your view of how the established institutions in this country, the courts, the press, the states, etc., how they're reacting to the first 100 days of President Trump.
Well, it's a good question, Paul. I think the most interesting thing is I think our institutions have shown themselves to be quite resilient. Two federal courts have struck down most of that. Trump can call us the failing New York Times all he wants, but trust me, he doesn't miss an issue. And trust me, when we do a 6-column headline and anything he's up to, we can turn his day upside down. And if you think people are following Breitbart and not us, and by the way, I do have to thank him because we added 300,000, just under 300,000 digital subscribers in the last quarter. 2014 and 2015 combined. So it turns out a lot of people don't want fake news. And so he keeps calling us the failing New York Times, and he is making us so much more profitable. And that really, Donald, this buzz for you. That makes me. Yeah.
Yes, you're talking about these accelerations both technologies and then challenges in the environment, et cetera. And a lot of people think there has to be some acceleration of the mechanisms of democracy, and so we can handle all this as a people.
Yes.
And I was very happy when you spoke at the high school several months ago that you just out of the blue mentioned ranked choice voting, which is one of my interests.
Yeah.
And last week at our city council meeting,
Here it is,
they made the first step towards hopefully getting ranked choice voting by not having a primary.
Yes.
But then they do need to put in ranked choice voting so it isn't so chaotic.
Right.
And I kind of told certain people that I would mention it to you when you came, and I did say that to the council, but a native son of our community
Supports ranked choice voting, yeah.
progress, and so I said I would tell you tonight
I appreciate
that
that.
we're on our way.
Well, by the way, that is one of my 18 platforms in Mother Nature's political party. And just for those of you who don't know, ranked choice voting is basically what they did in California. They said open primary. So the top 2 vote getters win, do a runoff, basically. And so what does that mean? It means if I'm a Republican, I better appeal to some Democrats. If I'm a Democrat, I better appeal to some Republicans, because I can't ever be sure, especially if I'm one of the last 2, because you could end up with 2 Republicans or 2 Democrats, running. And so it pushes people much more to the center. So California's already gone to that.
Britain, only London has ranked choice voting.
Yeah, California does now too. Yeah. Thank you for your question.
Let's open it up to anybody else who has questions. Anybody else?
Hi, thank you. I skipped to the environmental chapter in your book and I really enjoyed it, but I'm so excited to finish it. I'm interested in farming. I study carbon farming as a way to mitigate further effects of climate change and reverse it. And it's really clear to me that carbon farming, sequestering carbon into soils, has to take place the world over. So that's kind of one thing, but really I always have been very interested in the Middle East, just because of my lifetime, things have been really blowing up. And so sad to me to hear the environmental reasons for why, for really that underpinned the Arab Spring. How are people going to return and live there?
Well, it's a, it's a I can tell, heartfelt question. And I've spent so much of my life, studying, living in that part of the world, traveling there with so many friends there. I don't have a simple answer. What you're seeing is an accumulation of so much bad leadership for so long, so many bad choices, and that these countries, many of them are just hanging on by a thread, because Egypt will soon have 100 million people, probably half, easily half under the age of 30, and in an age where head of Intel tells me his daughter not well. So if you were planning on writing a taxi, working on a simple machine, that's going to be gone. And so, it's because I'm an optimist. I'm always looking. I like to highlight. So the method to my madness is when I see something that works, I like to use my platform to highlight it in hopes that it gets better. So I was just in Dubai a couple weeks ago, and Dubai is not a democracy; it's an emirate. It's an absolute monarchy. It's built on cheap labor from Southeast Asia. And yet, the leadership there has created a really kind of interesting place where young Arabs can come and gather and do art and science and really interesting stuff, as long as they don't write an op-ed, attacking the leadership, basically. But when you go there, it's quite a happening place. You meet really interesting people. And I did a column once saying that this was very controversial in Egypt, that Dubai caused the Arab Spring. Because all these young Arabs were coming to Dubai and saying, let's see, they speak Arabic, check, my country speaks Arabic. They eat Middle East food, check, my country eats Middle East food. They dress like I dress. But my country's going nowhere. And this place is got a lot of interesting things going on. And I think that that sent a lot of people back home, because if you tell me Israel's doing all this, Israel's different religion, different culture, but when they see other Arabs globalizing in a really interesting way, I think some of them came home and said, why isn't this happening here? I covered the Arab Spring in Cairo. I was in Tahrir Square. And I was staying at the Marriott, the Nile Marriott, which is a Marriott hotel, as a type of the name of it's on the night. And I used to walk out the hotel. I was on the Arab Spring. And the Nile was right there. And there's sort of fence there. And it was all overgrown weeds, broken sidewalk, and garbage strewn. And I should have gone about this. I said, Hussein Mubarak probably drove across the Nile Bridge here every day. And never once occurred to him look down and say, wow, I could imagine a huge walkway there along the Nile, where my people can come out in this densely populated city, mothers can push babies in carriages, people can sell things, there could be music. And so the column I used it for was that I said, I would like to write Mubarak's indictment. And I knew Mubarak pretty well. And he was not a killer. Relative to the neighborhood, not at all. He wasn't even much of a thief. I don't think he stole them. But I said, my indictment would say, you are guilty of the worst, or second worst crime I could ever think of a leader towards people. You're guilty of the soft bigotry, of low expectations about your own people. How could you rule a country for 30 years and half the women still can't read and 25% can't? And so that's why when you ask me this heartfelt question, it's like the story of the guy gets lost. Yeah, where's the Sabes JCC? And you ask the policeman, and the policeman says, well, you wouldn't start from here. And so like I don't even know anymore, like where do you start? So when I get lost that way, what I try to do is say that look for the examples that are in their own culture and amplify them. And that's what I would be doing right now. My foreign policy is where there's disorder, I'll prefer order. So for Morsi, I'll prefer Sisi. But where there's order, try to make it more decent. Sisi isn't doing. Where there's decent order, Jordan, try to make it more consensual. And where there's consensual order, Tunisia, protect it like a rare flower. That would be my sort of foreign policy for the Middle East. I don't know what they're thinking, but I feel bad, but I've kind of emotionally checked out. And still love the people, I still go there often, but it all kind of broke my heart. Please. No, back to it.
So President Trump has kind of gone through several evolutions on Middle East policy. And so, at best, we could probably say that it's incoherent and still developing. In this void of American leadership in the Middle East, what do you think is going to take place? How do you think things will unfold?
It's a good question, and obviously hard to predict. It's what's going on in Israel right now is in the absence of any kind of American policy or pressure. The most dynamic and energetic force in the society has a real advantage, and that's settlement. And so it's kind of now on autopilot and really going. Now Trump's told them, hey, don't build so many settlements, but, and maybe that will slow down, but, you know, there are somewhere between 400 and 500,000 settlers down in the West Bank, not including Jerusalem suburbs. So it took 50,000 Israeli troops to remove 8,000 settlers from Gaza. I'll let you do the math about the likelihood of something happening there. So I think Israel's on a really dangerous path toward becoming a binational state. And if you believe that Israel is a Jewish democracy, this is going to be threatening going forward. Which is why one of the columns I did do addressed to Trump was, you may not be interested in Jewish history, but Jewish history is interested in you. As Trotsky would, to paraphrase Trotsky. Because you have to be president at a really fulcrum time. And the story I told was there's a Jewish country club in Washington, D.C. called Woodlawn. It's the Oak Ridge of Washington, D.C. Speak in the local language. President Obama used to play there occasionally. So the president was staying in Washington because his youngest daughter is still in school. He's staying there this year to see her through high school. And so the question naturally arose, is he going to play golf? And the assumption was, and the word kind of got out, he was going to join Woodlawn Country Club. Then in the last month of his administration, he did not exercise the U.S. veto on a UN resolution condemning Israel for the continued expansion of settlements in the West Bank. And a group at Woodlawn Country Club circulated a petition that Obama should not be allowed to join that club. As a result of that, which in my view was just horrific. Obama had just negotiated a $38 billion 10-year security arrangement with Israel. And this got into the Washington Post. So then another group from Woodlawn said, no, he should be allowed to join. And what I explained in my column is that little fight there, that is a microcosm of what is going to happen to every Jewish institution in America. When Israel was, when the argument of Israel was where the border should be with Palestinians, I think the line should be here in the West Bank, you think it should be there. When the border was left or right, you know, we could all debate. We could all be here in the Jewish community in Minneapolis, or in Washington, D.C., or in Woodlawn Country Club. I think the border should be here, you think it should be there. But we're all in the same discussion. When it moves from two states to one state discussion, that's not left-right anymore. That becomes right-wrong. And if that's where this goes, it will blow up every Jewish institution in America, just like it ripped apart Woodlawn Country Club. And that is so dangerous. And so my column was, Mr. President, you may not be interested in Jewish history, but Jewish history is interested in you. Because you happen to be president when this possibility is now on the table. And I'm appealing to you to use your good offices to prevent it from happening. You know, I tell people all this time, I can actually ruin any dinner party. I do weddings, I do bar mitzvahs, whatever y'all like. Yeah.
Tom, you were asked a question earlier. What St. Park is thinking in terms of the city has just initiated a program called Vision 3.0, which is asking all of us and all of our neighbors to let the city know what improvements the residents and the people that work in St. Louis Park, what they want the city to do for this community over the next 10 years. There's a wonderful office set up at City Hall called Vision 3.0, And there's a wonderful gal coordinating it by the name of Meg. I think that this audience knows many things that we ought to develop and have for the people of St. Louis Park. But the city honestly wants to know, and that will drive the city council to take those on as priorities. So I think the city is right now inviting us to get involved.
Well, let me see if I were still living here, and the news for having the views I have. I do think that St. Louis Park has, in its DNA, two things that are so hard to get, and are going to be so important in the world we're going into. One, it does have ethic of inclusion. It's not perfect, it's never perfect, but it's in the DNA. You can see it in the school system. And in a world that's only going to get more diverse, more pluralistic, more minority majority, having an ethic of inclusion is a credible strategic advantage. And the second thing it does have is a real appreciation for and value for learning for its public school system. And I believe we're going into a world where the single most important demand you're going to have as a worker is, are you a lifelong learner? There's the days when you could be my uncle and just go through high school and then dine out on that knowledge for 30 years. That's over. The days when you can just go to college for 4 years and dine out on that for 30 years, that's over. So if you want to be a lifelong employee anywhere now, you've got to be a lifelong learner. And so prizing, valuing education and creating systems within St. Louis Park that nurture inclusion and provide the opportunity for lifelong learning, adult learning, I think is going to be so important. Because I have a friend, Heather McGowan, she's heard one of my tutors on education, who says never today ask a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because whatever you want to be, unless it's a policeman or fireman, or some generic doctor or teacher, that job isn't going to be there. Ask your kid how you want to be when you grow up. Do you have a mindset toward lifelong learning? It's much more how you want to be than what you want to be. And so the communities that get that how right, that nurture, empower, and enable it, they're the ones that are going to really do well. And St. Louis Park's advantage is it starts in a place where some communities can only do.
One last question.
One last question. Always gets you involved.
Thank you so much. I wanted to just go back a little bit to the healthcare issue and the single payer. Just wondering your thoughts on, can we get there? How do we get there? I've worked in healthcare all my life, both as a provider and also in the drug development business. So, you know, I appreciate the regulations, which are restrictive, and the demand in our society for new treatments, for everything. But how do we pay for it and how do we get there?
Yeah, and I am not an expert on this subject, so I really defer to those who believe that that we need to build, not to get there one week, by building out Medicare and Medicaid and extending it to more and more age categories of people. That's the way we get close. And so you probably already captured extending my healthcare knowledge. You know, I would just say, thank you for your question. I wish I could do more. It's not my skill set. Before I end, I'd say that thank Susan and Paul, and Jeannie, you know, all these people who helped me with my book, incredibly generously. My old AP history teacher, Marge Damon, is here. Marge was a huge help in the town meeting. Min Cagle, the whole school board, whole school, the superintendent system was amazing, the city. But if you take one thing away from this book, it really is this, and I will read just one paragraph. It's actually my favorite paragraph because it really sums up how I feel. You know, I always tell people that those of you who follow me on Facebook and Twitter know that I'm actually not on Facebook and Twitter. I'm a fan of social networks. I mean, the New York Times tweets my column, so I have 725,000 followers, but I actually, if you're tweeting at me, you need to know I'm actually not watching. And that is because it goes back to why the book is called Thank You for Being With Us. And it really is called that as a affirmation that the faster the world gets, what matters most are all the things that are old and slow. It's actually all the stuff you cannot download. It's all the stuff you have to upload, the old-fashioned way. One good teacher to one good student, one good minister, rabbi, or imam to one good congregant, one good government official to one good citizen. It's actually all this new stuff, all these social networks. In my view, they're really crap. And I know there's a place for them, but it's just not my thing. And I really believe it's the faster the world gets, the more the old stuff matters. So I'll read 2 paragraphs because it's very meaningful to have you as the audience because other people really wouldn't know. So this is from the last 2 pages of the book. Don't get me wrong. Technology has so much to offer to make us more productive, healthier, more learned, and more secure. I'm awed by the intelligent assistance I discovered in researching this book and the potential it has to lift so many people out of poverty and discover talent and make it possible for us to actually fix everything. I'm hardly a technophobe, but we will get the best of these technologies only if we don't let them distract us from making these deep human connections, addressing these deep human longings, and inspiring these deep human energies. And whether we do that depends on all that stuff you can't download. The high five from a coach, the praise from a mentor, the hug from a friend, the hand up from a neighbor, the handshake from a rival, the totally unsolicited gesture of kindness from a stranger, the smell of the garden, not the cold stare of the wall. So let me truly end where I literally began. On a research trip back home in the summer of 2015, I drove by our old house in St. Louis Park at 6831 West 23rd Street, where my parents first moved from North Minneapolis in 1956. I hadn't done it for years, but decided on the spur of the moment to swing by. At one level, the neighborhood's tightly packed Rambler homes looked remarkably the same as when I left mine for college and for work in the 1970s. Ours was still painted a light blue. But something also struck me as different, and I couldn't put my finger on it at first. My old neighborhood was totally familiar, but slightly unfamiliar. It took me a while to figure it out, and then it finally dawned on me. It was the trees. They were all small and scrawny when I was small and scrawny. Ours was a spanking new neighborhood when I grew up there, and now half a century later, all the trees had grown tall and thick with long branches, and they were full of leaves. So much so that the neighborhood was considerably more shaded. The light had changed slightly, and it caught my eye because it contrasted with the much brighter mental image I had been carrying around for so long, like an old picture stuck in the back of my wallet. Those trees and I had both grown up and out from the same topsoil. And the most important personal, political, and philosophical lesson I took from the journey that is this book is that the more the world demands that we branch out, the more we each need to be anchored in a topsoil of trust that is the foundation of all healthy communities. We must be enriched by that topsoil, and we must enrich it in turn. That prescription is easier to write than to fill, but it is the order of our day. The real uber task of our generation is so much easier to venture far, not just in distance, but also in terms of your willingness to experiment, take risks, and reach out to the other when you know that you're still tethered to a place called home and to a real community. Minnesota and St. Louis Park together were that place for me. They were my anchor and my sail. I hope this book will inspire you to pause and strive and find yours, and don't worry if it makes you late.
And thank you, Tom and Susan. It's been a great evening for us. Love the stories and the reflections on the current administration, and especially that last chapter of the book. Tom, for the past 2 years, courtesy of the city of St. Louis Park, we've been selling decommissioned street signs. And we've been raising money, and that's been filling our operating funds, which puts us at this point in time where we can now focus our efforts on raising a capital campaign, which is what we're doing starting tonight. So it seemed fitting to present to you a sign award. Explaining that to the TSA. For anyone else who would like a street sign, we still have some. We saw them in the lobby. And I want to thank you all again for coming. Please give one last round of applause.
Yes, it is.